Hello everyone, this is Jonatan Åcerclinth and we are back with our 9th podcast here at ISO. And with me tonight I have Jason White. Good evening, Jason.
Hey, Jonathan, how are you doing?
Not too bad, a little bit tired after today's work. It's Monday for anyone listening to this when this was recorded. And
Yeah.
obviously work is going to be had, but really looking forward to this. And from what I gather, you're looking forward to this as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate you making the time to talk about this because as everyone knows, the Indianapolis 500 just concluded. And if you haven't watched it yet, we'll refrain from mentioning details because I know some people have to delay watching it. But a really exciting race. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you watch the highlights. It was one for the books for sure. But prior to the 500, I was actually in Indianapolis for a little bit, and I went to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame Museum for a very specific reason. I wanted to see the Rick Mears exhibit that opened a few weeks ago, and I'm here to share some tidbits from that and some footage, and hopefully you guys will find it entertaining and informative.
Which I certainly will, because this is the first time I've been seeing pretty much all of this, at least in the flesh, so to speak, or as near to in the flesh as can be possible with pictures and video footage. And one of the, I suppose, early bits for the Mears brothers were the Chenoweth Wedge, which is an example of the Volkswagen-powered buggies the Mears brothers drove early in their racing careers.
Yeah, I mean, most people recognize Rick Mears as an IndyCar star and a four-time winner, but he and his family got their start in off-road racing, running buggies like this one. And this is the first long wheelbase buggy built by Lynn Chenoweth, which he then gave to the Mears family. Bill Mears ran the car for a year before Roger competed with it for another year. They eventually sold the car to Rick Gallus. So here's a connection between Gallus and the Mears gang. I didn't know about this. You learn something new all the time.
You also ran into the Budweiser Jeep Honcho, which, if I understood that correctly, debuted in the 1979 Mint 400, a desert off-road race based in Las Vegas. And Roger Mears teamed up with owner and driver Mike Moore in this very Budweiser Jeep Honcho.
Yeah, this is the one car in the exhibit, if you don't count pace cars, that is not an open wheeler. And yeah, this is a purpose-built truck that is based on the Jeep J10 chassis with racing upgrades, and was featured in national advertising campaigns also for its obviously well-known sponsors. This Bud's for you. But yeah, Roger drove the Honcho from 79 to 82 and claimed more than a dozen wins, including the Baja 1000, Baja 500, the Mint 400, and 4 titles at the Riverside Off-Road World Championship. So yeah, a very important car in the Mears gang history, or truck, for sure.
It doesn't look to be that much dissimilar to what you would see today in like the Dakar Paris Rally.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, we talk a lot too about drivers and how they obtain their understanding of car control. Gilles Villeneuve raced snowmobiles in Canada, and Daniel Gaius got his start in drag racing, so and motorcycles too. But clearly, a great deal of the controlling a car on the edge they learned via that. And Rick Mears, I think, is another one who qualifies on that score. He learned a lot about controlling a car on the edge from being an off-road racer. So
for sure.
yeah.
We also had you looking in depth at the Newman Drieger Piker Streaker, to talk about a mouthful, which Rick competed at the Pikes Peak in 1976.
Yeah, he raced there in 74, 75, and 76. 74, he placed third overall and captured Rookie of the Year honors. 75, he didn't finish the race, but in 76, he partnered with Paul Newman and Doug Dreger in this buggy. And yes, it utilizes a Porsche Flat 4. And he captured the overall win that year, racing up the 14,000-foot summit with a time of 12:11.89. So a very important car, and a really neat looking car too. It has some vague Formula 5000 kind of shapes to it. Especially, it reminds me of a Lola, from the 70s. The way the air intakes are on the top, it's really interesting. But a very, very shapely off-road racer. Really fun to look at from all angles.
It certainly looks like it would be a great deal of fun to drive as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then we sort of go away from the off-road side of things, and we get into more of the USAC and IndyCar stuff with the Gould Charge Penske PC6, which Rick captured his first Indy 500 win in 1979. Only the second year he ever driven the 500.
Yeah,
on top of that.
Yeah, it was a pretty impressive feat for him to capture the 500 and well, in 78, he was on the front row as well. So he immediately established himself as one of the young guns, when he arrived in Indianapolis. But the interesting thing about this car is at the time, it was actually aging technology, this PC6, because the PC7 had been developed. It was a newer car, and before May, Penske asked Mears which chassis he wanted to use for the 500, and he chose the year-old PC6 because he was more familiar with that car. And in the race, it turned out that he won because Bobby Unser lost his top gear with about 20 laps remaining, and Mears passed his teammate and captured his first win at the 500. So, in the end, it was the right choice. He ended up going with a car that he felt more comfortable with and was actually more reliable. Not the first time that we would see an older car win the 500 based on the fact that it was older and more reliable and had a much more measured run compared to the more state-of-the-art equipment. So
what I would say also with the fact that he went on to the front row, with being either young or new to a racetrack, you might not be as careful, let's say, as other drivers would be. As I remember, for example, the pairing of Ekstrom and Prio when they went to Bathurst in, I think, like 2014, 2013, 2015, somewhere around there. And they ran into the top 10, like, pretty much from first practice. Yeah. And everyone was going like, how are they doing that? And I mean, just one of those things. Maybe not respecting the place as much as others would be doing.
Well, I mean, Rick was actually really lucky in his run of races in Indianapolis. He didn't have a major accident at the Speedway until 1991. Prior to that, it was just smooth sailing most of the way. But we'll get to that a little later when we get to some of the later cars. But the next car actually is a rather infamous Rick Mears car.
Oh dear, indeed, the Gould Charge Penske PC9B.
Yes,
which was the year Mears had his infamous pit fire in 1981.
Yeah, that was also the year that his teammate Bobby Unser won in very controversial fashion over Mario Andretti.
Indeed.
So it was a pretty heavy year for more reasons than one. But yeah, Mears came into the pits and there was a massive fuel spill and it instantly ignited. And of course, the scary thing about methanol fuel is that you can't see the flame. So you had people jumping around and they were just basically dumping water everywhere and shooting the fire extinguisher foam. But not before, unfortunately, Rick got his his nose burned and his eyelids and portions of his face. So he had to end up having plastic surgery after that just to correct it. It wasn't anything too crazy. It's not on the order of, say, what Niki Lauda had to endure obviously.
Mm.
But he was obviously out of the race that year, and it was a very scary situation. He was very lucky to escape with minimal burns. But the other thing too, that accident led to some revisions. Well, that and actually there was also a pit fire at Michigan that year. So CART basically said, okay, we need to change this here. Something's not right. And they ended up making a lot of revisions to the fuel filling situation. They put a dead man's valve on the tank and everything. And I think they changed the probe as well that went into the car. So so at least they were able to react to that and make things safer. So if there is a silver lining to a situation like that.
And we then have, from the following year, 1982, the Gould Charge Penske PC-10, which was the car that Mears had that electrifying duel with Gordon Johncock.
The thing that was so cool about this, Jonathan, is that they placed them in the museum the same way they were on the track. So you had John Cox's car on a platform with the yard of bricks underneath it as it's crossing it, and then a little bit to the right and further back was Mears's car. So they had placed it basically, and they've done that before when they've had these two cars there. They placed them in such a way to kind of recreate the finish. But anybody who has watched that finish will tell you it doesn't matter how many times you watch it, 10, 100, 1,000 times, I don't care. Every time you watch that finish, you can just feel that the hair is standing up in the back of your neck and just gives you chills. And it is one of the most exciting finishes in racing history. It's just amazing. Sure. Yeah. And that car was actually a successful car. It's also the same model. Sister car was the one that Kogan started the race in and had that infamous accident taking out Mario and bending AJ's suspension on the left-hand side and incurring his wrath, which was not fun, I'm sure. But in any case, the car is a very modern-looking car with this kind of pointed, like a needle nose, and very state-of-the-art for the time. But yeah, it's usually remembered for that infamous second place finish. And credit given where credit's due. Right at the very end of the race, when they interviewed Mears and Penske right away said, we should be the one who takes this loss, not Rick, because because John Cox's team did a full, or not a full, he did a timed stop. Because they only knew that they knew they only needed so much fuel. So they made a signal and let him go when they knew they had enough. They'd done the calculation. They, on the other hand, the Penske team didn't do that. And that basically was, so if they had done a similar time stop, they probably would have been ahead at the end. Not probably, they would have been.
Yeah, so, by say a few seconds then, most likely.
But kudos to Roger for owning up to that right away.
For sure.
That's classy. So, but that's the last car that really was in this exhibit of the Gould variety. Then we move into the Pennzoil series of cars, which I think most people associate Rick with over the years.
Quite, and also among the exhibits, the first, as we move forward in the time, where he didn't drive a Penske, was actually a March '84C.
Yeah.
With which obviously Mears won his second 500 in 1984.
Yeah, I mean, Penske had designed a chassis for 1984, but it, due to the increased competition from March and their new car, Penske decided to set aside the PC-12 and purchase March '84Cs for his team. And this would not be the last time that he would do this. He did the same thing in 1987 when the Penske designed by Jenkins just didn't measure up, unfortunately. But yeah, the only serious competition that for Rick that day was the defending race winner Tom Sneva, and a broken CV joint ended Sneva's day, and then Mears led a total of 119 laps and finished 2 laps ahead of second place finisher Roberto Guerrero. So that was a pretty solid performance that day from the Penske team and Rick Mears.
So that's certainly one of those where you just go, yeah, this was pretty much a perfect day.
Yeah, nothing to mar this one. But the next one in this cadence, not a completely perfect situation, but a real storybook situation for sure.
I believe it's one of the cars that we had used in our recreation of the 1988 USAC/kart championship. The PC-17, which was a gorgeous car that Mias drove to his third 500 victory, that
Yeah,
being 88.
indeed, we did have this car in our 1988 mod. This was a car designed by Nigel Bennett. Beautiful, gorgeous car. So well put together. There's so many other race cars you can look at where two surfaces kind of come together, or a series, and they just kind of meet, and there's no real elegant kind of way to do it. It just happens. Every line and every surface in this car is so well thought through, so well considered. It's just a beautiful, beautiful car, and it goes as fast as it looks. Yeah, Mears captured his fourth pole in this car for Indianapolis at 2:19 and change. And then on race day, the track had changed, and this is because it had rained. And this is a common thing in Indianapolis. If it rains overnight, you can bet the track is going to be different the next day. And they missed the setup, and Mears actually fell laps down in the race, and they just had to make changes as they went to bring the car back, to a point where it was competitive. And incrementally, little by little, throughout the 88 500, they did. And then conversely, Sullivan's car, who's his teammate, the handling in that car started to decline, and he had a crash just past the halfway point. And then Mears was then the fastest car in the track, and he led 89 laps and captured his third 500. So, a lot of people love to say if you fall off the leader lap, you're probably done at Indianapolis. Well, Mears proved that wrong.
For sure. Even 2 laps down.
Yeah.
It's like, no. It can still be done.
Yep.
Now we move another 2 years forward in this trip down the Mias career with the Pennzoil Penske PC-19, which was also the last Pennzoil car Rick Mias drove.
Yeah, after this point, Pennzoil moved to the Jim Hall VDS team with John Andretti, and the Penske team moved to Marlboro sponsorship for their entire team across the board. But this was kind of an off year for Penske, 1990. I was kind of surprised to see this car in the exhibit because they had a rough year at Indianapolis. They had blistering problems with their tires throughout the race. They weren't the only ones. A lot of people did. And Ari Leyendijk ended up winning in a Lola. But this car is interesting too, because if you look closely at it, especially when you compare it against the one from 1988, it is much narrower in the driver's compartment, because IndyCar was always making little tiny changes to the cars in terms of aerodynamics and in terms of rules. Nothing drastic, no wholesale changes like you would see in F1, but enough that people had to reconsider how they were designing the cars. So when they change the rules and they need to get some speed back, one of the first places they went is narrowing the cockpit area. So that was the thing that really struck me when I looked at the 17 versus the 19. I'm like, whoa, this is really tight. So, which was fun because the livery is the same. And if you're just walking by them quickly, it's easy to just dismiss them as similar cars. But if you look closer, it's very narrow in there. So
it's a bit like, oh dear, they went on a diet here.
Yeah. And I remember actually with the 17, the PC-17 Penske, Jackie Stewart did a drive of the car at Mid-Ohio.
Oh, indeed.
I think you've seen that video. And he mentioned how much room there was in the car at the time. He's like, it feels like the sitting room in a hotel or something. He's like, I have all the room in the world. Of course, he was speaking relatively compared to other Formula cars that he had driven in that series. But yeah, you can see how it's amazing the difference there. And they're just simply trying to get it to cut through the air cleaner and lessen the frontal area just to get back some of what they lost with rule changes. So
we now move to what was the Marlboro Penske PC20, which saw an epic duel with Michael Andretti, which led to Rick's fourth 500 win.
Yeah, that duel with Michael Andretti is legendary. Michael passes Rick, and then Rick comes right back the very next lap and passes him back. And it was just like, these were just passes that were just, you could only do if A, you were as skilled as a Michael Andretti or a Rick Mears, and B, if you had the courage and the trust with the other driver to do it. You wouldn't do that with just anybody. But you just look at that. If you haven't seen those, you can look at them on YouTube, but it's just like, you look at these and it's just like, these guys are the best at what they are doing. They are world class, and this is the proof. But the story behind this car too is there's more to it than that. I mentioned before that Rick hadn't had a serious accident at Indy until 1991. He crashed his primary car in a pretty dramatic accident coming off, I think it was turn 2. The car turned over and was on its on the rollover bar and stuff, and it was easily the most rough accident he had at the Speedway. So that was the primary car. He steps into the backup car and puts it on the pole in a fantastic drive, just immaculate 4-lap run. And then in the race, he has that duel with Andretti and ends up coming out to win the fourth victory. So it just not only does that say a lot about his skill as a driver, but also about his resilience. I mean, he had nothing. I mean, that was the first time he had to deal with an accident like that, and he just got right into the backup car and took care of business, which is just amazing. That's why he's the legend he is.
That, and as you say, as I'm reading through, as I'm getting memories of that, both of them passing each other around the outside.
Yes, it was around the outside.
In turn 1, that's like, holy moly. Just as a viewer, you just go,
yeah.
Oh God, they survived. And then a lap or two later, oh, they survived again.
There were some passes on the outside in yesterday's 500 too, without giving away what happened, that made me want to hold my breath. But pretty amazing stuff. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's a recap of 10 cars there, I think, that were in the exhibit that really, I thought it was an excellent exhibit. And if anybody is actually in the Indianapolis area and they want to check it out, they definitely should. It's going to be there for a while. That's the nice thing too about the exhibits that they have there. They don't just put them up and then a week later they're gone. There's also an Andy Granatelli exhibit there, which is really nice, with a bunch of very, very bright STP orange cars. And they also, like, the first thing that you see when you walk in there too, which was really nice, they had a Bobby Unser's winning car from 1981. And they just had a simple, kind of plaque next to it, remembering Bobby Unser. So, which was obviously very appropriate. But I wanted to share the exhibit with our ISO members and fans on YouTube, because I thought it would be good.
Yeah, certainly very thankful for that. And we have one more, what I would dare possibly say is the creme de la creme of this one.
Maybe.
Depends on how you look at it, I suppose, but the Indy racing experience. And we understand that you actually drove an actual Indy car at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Please tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I can actually say that now. I have actually driven an Indy car at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. There aren't many people who can say that. And from what I understand, they're letting a John Q race fan drive an Indy car in the Speedway is probably not something that's going to happen much anymore. They told us as we were doing the orientation to do this, that probably that this would be the last time they're going to do this. And it's just going to be the ride-alongs from here on out.
Wow.
In the tandem cars. So we all looked at each other and we're like, shoot, we chose right, because we can always come back and have Mario take us around, or something.
Yeah.
but yeah, they got us all suited up with helmets and balaclavas and gloves. We get out there and they paired me with this nice kind of medium blue colored G-Force chassis, probably from the late 90s or early 2000s,
Mm.
but really nice car. Obviously with a very detuned engine inside. Um, but and I noticed a lot of people were having difficulty getting away from the pits, even though they were being pushed, because these cars did have a clutch and a brake and accelerator. So you had to time the accelerator and the clutch just right. My brain
Mm.
immediately went back to when my dad was teaching me to drive a stick in parking lots when I was a kid. So they start up the thing. We wait for the lead. You're led around by a car that's kind of just basically leading you around so that you know when to come in and all this stuff. And they're like,
Mm.
all right, we're going to give you a push. And they gave me a push, and I pressed the accelerator and let out the clutch, and the thing just took off. And so right away I was like, yes, I didn't make a fool of myself. So we're exiting I'm exiting the on the warm-up lane and just taking it really easy, just trying to get a feel for the car. And as I'm coming through the end of the warm-up lane, all of a sudden on my right, here comes one of the tandem cars. I'm like, oh shoot, these things are on the track too. And then another one comes screaming by. So I'm like, okay, all right. So I'm probably not going to be going too close to the wall on this run. So the first couple of laps, I was just trying to get used to the car and how sharp the steering was, which was sharper, frankly, than I was expecting. The third lap was where I really started to get the thing rolling, and was driving more of a traditional line. And it was, even though it was at reduced speed, I probably didn't go any faster than 105 or 106, I would say. It was a very detuned car, but it was enough for you to get an idea, an inkling of what it's like at speed. And to say that it gives you a new appreciation for what these drivers do is an understatement. It just, as I got out of the car, I was just like, I have a whole new level of appreciation for what they do and what they're able to do. And I knew this was going to happen, but by lap 3, I was so comfortable. And then, of course, I had to come in, and I'm like, man. And they were so cool, this group. As I'm coming in, I shut the car off, and one of the guys who was organizing the thing had the presence of mind to take the GoPro off the nose of the car, turn it around, and point it at me as I'm getting out of the car. So it would capture me exiting the car. And I told him afterwards, like, man, thanks so much for that. That was really thoughtful. So it was a great experience. It was a lot of fun.
Certainly sounds like it.
Yeah.
An experience I would love to be able to have on any racetrack, to be fair.
Yeah.
And the way you describe the tandem cars coming past, that sounds like when you're out on the highway and you're going like you're like 35, 40 mph, and all of a sudden there's a motorbike screaming past you that you didn't notice in your rearview mirror.
Yeah, it was essentially it was essentially like that. Yes. Yeah. But anyway, that was a really good trip. And hopefully I'll get to hopefully I'll get to go to another museum at some point, and we can do a similar thing. But I really appreciate you coming on here and going through this with me, Jonathan, because it's the content was really good, and I thought our viewers would appreciate it. So.
Very thankful for you too, for bringing all of this to all of us. Really, it's as I said, I've barely seen any of this in the flesh or near the flesh, and it's fantastic to watch and listen to. This has been a great experience for me, as I'm sure it'll be for everyone who gets to listen and watch this.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, Jonathan. I appreciate your time.
Thank you to you too, and thank you to everyone watching and listening to this. And I hope you've enjoyed this as much as we have. And I suppose I could leak now that if everything falls the way we would hope, we might have a very special podcast next time for our 10th.
We'll see.
In our cadence, but obviously we'll have to see.
We'll see. We're working on it. We will see.
But until then, thank you very much for tuning in, and I hope you all have a great time, and we'll be back later on for podcast 10. But for now, this is me, Jonatan Åcerclinth, and Jason White, signing off for now.
Bye, everyone.